that. So we're going to go ahead and kick off our Budget and Finance committee meeting. Welcome to all our friends out in the audience. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Dr. Battle to kick off this discussion, very important discussion on our budget. Thank you, Dr. Battle.
All right, thank you. So board members, thank you for all of your work, all the work that you've already put into this budget cycle, this budget season, and of course, we've already had one win. In a year when we did not expect to receive any capital funding, the mayor has put forward a capital spending plan that would allocate $72 million in stopgap funding that will help us tackle deferred maintenance projects, purchase school buses, and build an elementary school. And so what you have on the screen is a high-level overview of what is being proposed to be funded with that $72 million. Just so you know, these projects impact all 9 of your school districts and 29 out of 35 council districts. So we're able to touch many areas of our district. Most importantly, it improves the safety and security for our students. You'll see on the slide the categories for this funding. And again, we're very thankful to the mayor and look forward to the council funding these essential projects. We look forward to getting back on track with some of our other needs as we move forward with our next capital spending plan, which could likely include Hillwood High School, Lakeview Elementary, Percy Priest, design fees for the middle school in Cane Ridge and the Cane Ridge cluster, and many others. But please thank the mayor, Metro Council, for taking a look at this and being responsive to the needs of the district.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, so we're going to kick off this committee meeting with first just refreshing ourselves around the 7 board-approved budget priorities for this budget cycle. Again, they are listed on the screen in order of prioritization. I will go ahead and share that we've hosted 2 community budget meetings thus far. They have been very well attended, and we've received a pretty good response thus far from the community. We've also shared the budget slides with our PAC, with our teacher cabinet, and with our members of SEIU. So again, very good feedback. It's been overwhelming in support around prioritization, specifically for compensation, and with the SEL academic integration being number 2. Part of our meeting today, you may hear from some of our community members who might offer additional feedback for us to take in consideration, for you to take in consideration as we build out this budget process. But we know that it truly takes all of us being a part of this process and definitely advocating for the needed investments as we move forward. So I want to remind everyone of our maintenance of effort budget. This is a part of our presentation in our community budget meetings. I just want to remind everyone that currently we have a budget of $922 million, and in order to maintain where we are today, all the programmings and all the moving pieces we have in place, we would need an investment of approximately $28 million just for maintenance of effort, bringing us to a total of $950 million. I also want to remind everyone that there are several unknowns, so there are some pieces that we are not able to finalize and cost for next year, but this is the best estimate to date. Under compensation, which is the board's first priority, we know that the mayor has commissioned a pay study. I want to remind everyone that the information learned from this study will be coupled with what we've learned from our previous MNPS study that is specific to our certificated teachers. And so we will be using that information to finalize the investment ask as we move forward, but that study is still ongoing. We're very hopeful that within the next few weeks we'll have more information to move us forward with a final number. We also know that an additional study for our other employees is much needed. It's feedback that I have continued to receive that as we make some final decisions around our certificated staff, that we do the same process to a degree for our support employees. And of course, our board has also asked for analysis around bringing custodians in-house, which our team has worked diligently around to make sure we have some strong estimates and numbers to inform us as we move forward. Part of the ask today from our chair and vice chair of this committee was for us to start to look at our priorities, the broad categories, and within them begin to prioritize the specific initiatives and strategies that we have identified that will move the needle forward. So as we move about, what I'll be stopping and pausing to gather more information around is any feedback that will help us prioritize within the specific strategies. I think the compensation priority might be the most difficult one because we don't know what the salary schedule may look like after we get the information back from the study, but we can begin to look at what other supplemental areas we will want to prioritize within and under compensation. Under the competitive pay, what's been recommended thus far is that we look at a 3-year phase for investing in employee compensation. Year 1 being a significant down payment and investment around our teacher salaries, but also addressing the cost of living rates for all of our other employees. Year 2 would call for an adjustment in our pay for our support employees and continue to look at what the COLA would be for our teachers. And then Year 3 will kind of be a balancing to make sure we're shoring up and accelerating based upon the decisions that are made in the actual pay scale itself. So I want to pause first and see if there's any additional feedback around the phases of the timeline, given that we do not have final numbers to date.
I have a question, and I think the only person that can help me with this is Anna. At some point in time, we'd had a conversation, and maybe you can help me too, Mr. Henson. We'd had a conversation that was similar to this, where we talked about year over year, things we wanted to do around increasing teacher pay. This isn't the first time we've had a multi-year discussion, right? And I'm just curious if we can recall, other than we just didn't get the money, were there any other things that threw us off course? Because I think we're going to have to be really strategic about how we protect this strategy if this is what we want to go forth with, because I think we took a lot of heat, right, for not following through on that multi-year promise, and we hid behind the skirts of we just didn't get the money, right? And so I think this looks good, and I'm really sensitive to things that I believe are just politically motivated, and it makes us look good to have this conversation and to say this. I think we just need to be careful where we're positioning the expectation if the only thing that we're relying on to be able to follow through on this is to get the money to do it in the next year budget cycle, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Following me?
Yes.
So I'm asking, so is that the only thing that threw us off course was that we just didn't get the money? And is there a different way or a different strategy that will allow us to protect at least the intent of being able to continue to increase salaries or continue to invest, I should say, invest in compensation?
Yeah, and Dr. Gentry, as you said, and I don't know how far back you're thinking, but I know
I'm old, Chris.
so am I. I know that going back maybe 5 or so years ago, we did have a look at our salary schedule and the structure of the salary schedule, and came to the conclusion back at that point that our mid-career teachers were not benefiting as much as particularly our beginning teachers. We did propose some changes that were not funded. We also know that Metropolitan government, they passed a 3-year pay plan for all Metro government employees, which ended up not being funded either. So it's mainly been the lack of funding of the plan. And of course, you had another discussion at a previous board retreat regarding an internal pay study as well. And I don't know if you were talking about that too, but not usually, from everything that I can remember, it's always been we did not receive the funding necessary to do what we felt like we needed to do as it related to compensation.
And Mr. Henson is remembering what our conversation was at our last board retreat.
Yeah.
We talked about that very thing about the mid-level teachers and what it would take monetarily to bring them up to speed as far as pay-wise, and it was not a low figure at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It never has been. I don't know. So I'm just, if there's a way that we can do this, be strategic, because, and again, totally appreciative of everything that the mayor has done and the council attempts to do, but I think we've got to take more ownership, and we've got to be more intentional in how we manage the funds so that we can be more consistently contributing to our employees' increasing compensation. So if there's, I don't know, I mean, you know, we can talk about how we do that in some other way, but I just think we need to be a little bit more creative, and we're going to have to own it ourselves.
Thank you. And again, the recommendations here are just, as we're thinking about coming up with the final number, what kinds of things we would want to solve for in year 1, year 2, and year 3, understanding, to your point, Dr. Gentry, that we won't be able to solve for everything potentially in 1 year. So this is a way to try to get at that and to maintain that progress as we move forward. All right, so on the second slide here and under employee compensation, just reminding everyone this is our #1 priority. We have several strategies that are within the employee compensation priority. I do want to remind everyone that as we went over these 2 weeks ago, we talked about that some of these may or may not be needed based upon what comes out of the study itself, or there could be some that we could help supplement or complement what's available to us. And so we have 8 different strategies here. I want to remind you, paid family leave, retention bonuses, recruitment incentives, attendance bonuses, minimum wage, meaning getting all of our employees at minimum at the $15 per hour, paid Veterans Days, paid days for support employees, and the number you see there is the cost per day. So there's not a number attached to it, just having a number to be grounded around, and bus driver increases, which is a $1 per hour increase across the board for our bus drivers in the district. So I just want to pause for just a moment for any feedback that might be offered to help prioritize these strategies within this priority if all things were neutral. If we did not, were not able to solve for, or we continued in a traditional manner, are there others you want to prioritize as we move forward?
So I have a question concerning bus drivers. I know we started off the year with a deficit in bus drivers. Are we still there, and does anyone know approximately how many we are short?
We do currently still have a shortage for our bus drivers. At tonight's board meeting, we can share an update now if you would like, but at tonight's board meeting, our chief of HR, Dr. Barnes, will be providing some numbers updates regarding teacher vacancies and bus driver vacancies.
We still have shortages?
We do still currently have shortages.
So I'm sorry, may I? Yes. Thank you. So the only thing I would say about this list is, you know, there's a lot of different stuff here. And so looking at it from a hiring perspective, if I had this at my disposal trying to build a team, I would look for those things that would make some of these other things unnecessary, right? And I don't want to call out anything in specific here right now, but I think if I make myself more competitive, then I draw on more potential hires to compensate where I may be trying to just hold on to people, if you understand what I'm trying to say here. So, I mean, I just think that some of these strategies will get you more than some of the others will. And
I think that's the purpose of this
Yeah.
particular moment in time, is to figure out what those are.
so we need to, okay.
Just for this.
Rachel?
So within these strategies, my priorities would be the paid family leave and the bus driver increase. The attendance bonuses would be, we've heard a lot of feedback from bus drivers throughout the years of that the attendance bonuses can be difficult to obtain as emergencies come up, and then one day off, they've lost all of their attendance that they typically have perfect attendance for, except for this one situation. So to me, attendance bonuses would be the least attractive of trying to attract
Yeah, I would agree.
employees. To me, the paid family leave is extreme importance.
As someone in, well, still barely within childbearing age, I love the idea of paid family leave for sure, and want to go on record that I support that. But I have heard continually from support employees that those days off that they don't have are always an issue for them. So I think the paid days for support employees would be really high on my list, if not #1. Then, of course, the bus driver increase, kind of neck and neck. And then I think in alignment with days off for paraprofessionals, that paid Veterans Day. I mean, it's really hard to just pull on one because we just need our support employees to get more than they have. And they do typically feel left out of the conversation because we talk about teachers without letting everyone know, like, hey, when we're talking about teachers, we mean any educator. Like, you all need to be paid more. So I would say maybe start with that quote-unquote low-hanging fruit, the $225K for paid days for support employees, then maybe the bus driver increase, then maybe paid Veterans Day. But then depending on where everyone is, minimum wage is extremely necessary, you know, increasing that up to $15. So again, sorry to give you a non-answer, but I think this column of 4 are where my attention is most.
So I have a little bit of guilt associated with Veterans Day in that I was one of the people lobbying to have Veterans Day as a holiday for our employees. But if I'm not mistaken, it applies to certificated and non-certificated staff. It's just not for support employees. So that's for both classifications of employees. It's both. And I mean, I just, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, the minimum wage at $15 an hour, and I think I say it every time we have a budget and finance meeting, Metro employees got that last year. We did not. And I think that's just a travesty that they are considered more important than our hourly employees. I don't happen to think so, but, you know, if pay were the only judge of that, you know, they would win on that. I'm with you on the attendance bonuses. I would love to see us have, you know, the paid family leave, even though the governor has walked that back recently. I think it's still a very important, you know, compensation strategy, and to have our paras paid for, you know, the days that they are required to be there or not required to be there. It just throws a monkey wrench in their budgets, that they're in their personal budgets. And so I think we really need to pay attention to that. And of course, you know, bus drivers see our children first in the morning and see our children last in the evening, and you know, they transport our children to and from school. And I can't emphasize how important that is, having driven behind an MNPS bus all the way here today. So, you know, all of those I think are important, but some, like you say, would bring more return on investment than others.
I think the minimum wage, and I agree with Ms. Shepherd, is the crucial one because that's a fundamental change to the support staff. I mean, that will add a substantial raise increase. If the funding's not available, then I would go to paid support days and to Veterans Day, just because it helps complete a full paycheck. But the minimum wage is a fundamental pay and lifestyle difference if we reach that. So given what we have, I think you go for, you're talking about making a substantial down payment. That's a substantial down payment. The paid support days is ideal. If we can't make that substantial pay, then I think that would be a second tier. But if we're going to walk the walk and talk the talk, the raising the minimum wage is walking that walk. And then in the bus driver increase, I think that's another substantial down payment. We've known just through the history, going back a decade ago when their hours were cut, and how that affected a lot of bus drivers, caused, you know, some retirements to go, just because it affects, given their scheduling and how their schedule, it does not make it easier for them to pick up second jobs, particularly during the day, to make up for that income. I think that's a great thing, and especially given that a lot of our collar counties have increased their bus drivers' pay. We also could keep them competitive, going to Ms. Gentry saying about being competitive with our, with the surrounding school districts. I think those are the two biggest things to go for, getting the most bang for our buck, but also saying if we can put substantial down payment to our support staff. I believe that's saying that down payment.
How did we arrive at $4.9 million for attendance bonuses? Where's that dollar come from? How did we estimate
It's not
that?
here. So if you look at, if I can call your attention to one of the handouts you have up here, which is titled Budget Priorities and Strategies. Each one of the budget priorities you see have a theory of action behind them. We can turn over to the attendance bonuses, which is on the second page. And so as you calculate the attendance bonus, it is based upon all employees, and at an average rate of, I want to say it was about $1,000 right there.
So that is $1,000 up to 4.9 million, so $1,000 per employee for perfect attendance?
So the measure has not been set yet, but based upon the measure by which we adopt, the attendance bonuses would be awarded. And so we looked at previous attendance data across the district, given our certificated and our support employees, and generally speaking, where do we land with attendance every day. This was a crucial strategy that we identified simply because when we're talking about substitute teachers in classes and the instructional level that we want students to have access to every day. Yeah.
And then how many bus drivers are making less than 15 an hour? What percentage? 0. So the 15 would not
Apply to bus
apply
drivers.
to bus drivers, gotcha. Which is good to know. Mhm. Yes.
So going back to the attendance bonus, so have we looked at the reasons why employees aren't coming to work?
So we have, to a degree, we have some data that would give us more information. We know that culture and climate, we hear discipline, we hear pay. I mean, all of those same reasons why teachers don't remain could be indicators as to why they are not in attendance every day. We also know that we have some cleanup in data that we need to do because in some scenarios, when you're looking at teacher attendance data, it folds in professional development days and other days that we would expect for a teacher not to be there. So there's kind of a twofold approach in unpacking why they're not there, emphasizing the importance, but also what days do we count towards teacher attendance. And I think we would all agree that professional development should not count against a teacher when they're not in the classroom.
Yeah, so I'm just, I hate to be the Grinch at the table, but I'm just struggling with $4.9 million to address a symptom and not a problem. Because if they're not showing up, they're not showing up for a reason. And so I'd rather if it's discipline, I'd rather take some of that money and invest it in SEL. You see what I'm saying? If we really look at the reasons why people aren't showing up, I'd rather address the reasons why they're not showing up than to pay them to come to work to do their job, to get paid to come to work to do their job. Because at some point in time, if we address the problems and the causes of the absenteeism, what do I do with the $4.9 million that you've been giving me for coming to work? How do you just cut that off? So I just think it's a slippery slope. I think we need to spend more time, I think this goes with the compensation study data, spend more time looking at the causes of absenteeism among our professionals, and then see where that $4.9 million will eliminate the issue of attendance versus putting $4.9 million to encourage people to come to work. If we're not changing the environment they're coming to work in.
Yes. I just want to remind folks that they can sign up with Dr. Severe in the back corner over there if they want to participate in public participation here at the end of this meeting.
Thank you.
So what is the goal here? Are we supposed to today lay out our put these in order of some kind?
Yes.
Right now.
No problem. Okay. Okey-doke.
And we can capture everything and then begin to prioritize them and give them back to you to see and react to, if that's helpful as well. Okay? All right, are we ready for priority number 2? So priority number 2 is around social emotional learning and academic integration. On the budget slides previously that you've seen, we had this broken out over about 3 to 4 different slides. And so we've compiled them, have them on one slide so you can look at them all at one time. You see here that we have 10 strategies under SEL and academic integration, one of the most significant investments outside of employee compensation. And so I would just like to open it up for any discussion or feedback that might help us with prioritizing as we move forward.
Can somebody tell me why we changed the name to advocacy centers if it was previously called care centers?
Yes, so the design of the advocacy centers moving forward are to ensure that we have the most intensive supports available for students on campus, given any behavioral challenge, socio-emotional trauma challenges that a student may need addressed before being reengaged into the instructional block, coupled with an advocate or a success coach that will help students successfully transition back into class and to help with progress monitoring. We know that through this process, we want to equip students with the right skills and strategies to respond effectively while they're in class, but it takes progress monitoring, it takes follow-up and encouragement to ensure students are able to do so. So hence the change in name to advocacy centers, because you've got a twofold approach and the most intensive supports and the success coach to help them transition back into their school community, classroom community.
Okay, can I pull on that thread a bit? So this would be at every school, all 160, or all that are in under our purview?
No, so this current strategy would place advocacy centers in about 11 of our schools, most of them being priority schools. We have the largest number of schools in the elementary space, and so when you're talking about a significant investment like this, I believe it's important for us to make sure that we can build a quality structure to then look to leverage and to expand upon in years to come. And so it would meet the needs of our most needy schools, initially, again, around 11 schools that have already been identified, but we continue to monitor where their data is to get those specialized supports in schools. And as we build this structure out and we have some data that we can progress monitor around its effectiveness, begin to expand that across our district.
And so am I right to assume that the data you're looking at is maybe academic, but mostly behavioral?
Yes, it's twofold. So when you are thinking about our MTSS framework, it requires of us to look both at the academics and the SEL needs of students.
So if I could let me walk through this and just let me know if I'm wrong. So you have those in the community who will say, well, if we could just get rid of these 10 kids in this school, our school would be so different or so much better. And as we try to encourage the community to have a paradigm shift and stop considering getting rid of kids, this would say, all right, we have a success coach who will monitor those 10, 15, 20, however many students in your school that are having behavior issues. They will monitor them and kind of treat them as a caseload where if it's that an IEP or an S team is being started or if an IEP is in place, that person kind of monitors that alongside the exceptional education teacher, but that they also are just more responsible for students who have traditionally had instances of behavioral issue.
Yes, so what I hear most frequently back from our teachers around meeting the SEL needs, behavioral needs of our students, they bucket into 3 categories. Ensuring that our employees have the right professional development, so their capacity is there to identify and to be able to respond effectively. It is also about resources, making sure that once those needs are identified, there is someone or something in structure there that can immediately be responsive and transition with the student to make sure they have the right skills and supports. And the third thing is around expectations. And so the success coaches, as well as the most intensive support personnel, will be able to help with that too. We have to, one thing that we have learned over the years when it comes to behavior and SEL needs is that we have to take the time to teach. And while we have high expectations for our students, it is necessary for us to have the right supports available to our students and to our employees to wrap around our students and get them what they need. If we continue to suspend, to your question, and send students away, then we're never really replacing those behaviors with the appropriate ones, whether they be in class or as they move on in life.
I'm sorry if I could just clarify. So this I could take back to the community and tell that parent who's frustrated with the 2 or 3 kids that maybe their kid is identified in their class and say, well, if you were to help us advocate for these advocacy centers and success coaches, those 2 or 3 kids that you think are problem children could likely have someone to walk alongside them and make sure that they're integrated more appropriately.
Yes, that is correct. Right now, our resources do not allow these intensive supports in our schools. And so there is oftentimes a delay in getting those supports. And we recognize the need, but we don't have unlimited resources and or personnel who are trained to respond to those most intensive needs readily available. And so this will begin to kind of chip away at that need.
Perfect. Thank you.
And so to piggyback on Ms. Buggs, not just sharing that with parents, but also sharing that with teachers, because right now that's who I'm hearing from most are teachers who are frustrated because they're spending their entire classroom time, attending to discipline issues and not doing what they were hired to do. I know we talked about this maybe at our last meeting on the school nurse program, but in the expansion of that school nurse program, we would have a nurse at every school, not necessarily physically at every school, but assigned to every school. Is that correct?
So based upon the feedback we did receive from the board, we went back and made an adjustment in numbers. So you have two different strategies under school nurse program now. The original one was the $390,000, which was to expand to have a school nurse in every high school, which could then support the cluster schools. And we know in some areas that's larger than others. But based upon the feedback, we went back to see what would it cost to just have a nurse in every school based upon what we already have available in the district. So that's the difference in the $5.5 million versus the $390,000.
Can you describe the difference between success coaches and restorative practice assistants, and is there a licensure involved? Is there a particular profile that we would have of that employee?
Dr. Williams, I see you in the back. You want to come up and talk a little bit about the process and identification for our restorative practice assistants?
Good afternoon. So the restorative practice assistants, they will provide the professional development for our school teams, and they will help them not only to look at the academic piece, but the behavior piece when we're looking at the MTSS framework and working with kids. We're wanting to be more proactive instead of reactive to the behaviors, and we're seeing that if the restorative work is done and it's done in a comprehensive way, that they're seeing a more successful outcomes from the students. So, for example, we just opened the Serenity Room at Big Picture, and we're seeing a lot of those type approaches throughout the district, which lets us know that if it's done in a comprehensive way and done in an effective way, where they get the training and professional development that they need, that is really working. And so we're seeing that a lot of our school teams are looking for alternatives instead of looking to suspend kids. There's been a paradigm shift throughout the district from that of suspension to one of being more creative about what we're doing to change our approaches.
And in regards to the success coaches, the reason that you don't have a specific job title under that is that we're trying to move away from the one-size-fits-all. We want to make sure that we're well informed around the needs of the school and equip and/or staff the advocacy centers with the right support. So in one school, it could be a social worker. In another school, it could be a trauma-informed specialist. In another school, it could be a restorative practice assistant if that's what's needed. And then we would train the success coach based upon the needs of the schools to be that advocate and mentor given the population and the challenges in which we're trying to attack.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add the difference in the restorative assistant and the success coach is that the success coach will continue to work with the kid after they leave the care center to reintegrate them back into the classroom, and they will monitor the progress throughout. So a lot of times, like in alternative schools or suspension, kids come back, but the underlying root problem is still there, so they'll have someone to go with them through the integration process, which increases the likelihood that they won't repeat what they did before.
Yes. So I want to make, excuse me, I want to make sure that I'm clear. The success coaches, can they only happen if we have the advocacy centers? Or can they happen by themselves if we do not get the funding for the advocacy centers?
Okay, so I was looking for Dr. Griffin because she knows a lot more about the success coaches than I do. The care centers and the restorative practice assistants come through the SEL Student Services Department, and Dr. Griffin is responsible for the success coaches, but we will be working collaboratively.
In theory, they could work in isolation, but best practice is if they're paired, then you would get a higher return on your investment.
Okay, so they are only, success coaches would only go along with the 11 advocacy centers?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, and then as those students go through elementary school and they no longer have those success coaches, the hope would then be, I would assume, to go into the restorative practice assistants, because those are in the middle school, high school.
Middle and high.
And they're
That's
in
correct.
all of our schools,
That's
not
correct.
just the 11
That's
that are
correct.
identified.
So the investment you see here would place a restorative practice assistant in all middle and high schools.
Okay. I would just say that I think the restorative practice assistants are something that we should prioritize, particularly because it's all schools. And then the school counselors, we hear a lot of need for. So my follow-up question to that with the school counselors is, it says we're going to decrease the counselor to student ratio if we get the 10 additional counselors. Do we have the number that ratio would become?
Well, since the counselors are spending 80% of their time spent in direct services for kids, we had talked about the second counselor coming after 525 kids instead of what it currently is, and that's 700 students. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Anybody else? Yes.
On the, this isn't for you, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Unless you just want to stand here and chill out for a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
You're very knowledgeable.
Yeah. The poverty rates. Do we have data on how the poverty rate of the district has increased over maybe the past 3 years?
I'm sure we do. I just don't
Come on, Chris.
I'm sure we do. I just don't have it off the top of my head, and I'm looking around for assistance, and I don't see
Everybody
it. Has it either.
We ask y'all all kinds of
Just bailed
questions.
out.
Sorry.
We can get that too.
Everybody's
We do
looking
have
at-
that
I don't-
information.
No eye contact, make no eye contact.
But we can't,
Everybody's looking at their phone. I don't know.
we can probably speak to particularly what we know around the CEP program and what's happening with our direct certification. I don't know who is going to be best positioned to.
Yeah, the community eligibility provision program, which allowed us to offer the no-cost meals to all students 5-6 years ago, that is measured through the direct certification process, which I think we talked about at the last Budget Committee meeting, where if you qualify for food stamps or TANF benefits, then you automatically are direct certified as considered economically disadvantaged by the state's definition. Unfortunately, we know that many of our families, particularly our undocumented families, do not participate in the SNAP benefits, or and therefore they don't have Social Security numbers, so they're not in the direct certification system, and so it's difficult for us to really measure what that number looks like. It hurts us, of course, on our nutrition services front. It also hurts us with our federal Title I funding, and it also hurts us with our state funding, since there is a component in the state's BEP funding formula for at-risk students, which is identified by economically disadvantaged. So it hurts us in several ways that we're not able to capture all of those families, and it also makes it difficult for us to get a true apples-to-apples measure of what poverty really looks like in Davidson County.
So is this poverty rate what we've talked about in compensating for not having true data? Or is this really just overall, just a general increase for that?
This would be in the student-based budgeting formula. We already have a poverty weight of 5%. And so any student that is considered economically disadvantaged, there's a 5% additional weight added. This would increase that poverty weight. Each percentage point equates to an additional $1.3 million. And so if we wanted to increase that poverty weight in the student-based budgeting formula that provides funding allocations directly out to schools, there would be a cost to it to do that.
Right, so we would go to 6% if we got this.
Or more, depending on how many percentage points we chose.
Yeah, it could be,
Oh, so it's not 1.3.
1.3 million is for a 1 percentage point increase, so it would take it from 5% to 6%.
Right.
If we wanted to increase it exponentially, we could with additional funding. And I believe, Brian Hull, I believe this is probably the most requested change in the student-based budgeting formula from our principals.
Yeah, so, and the
Even though
reason.
they do receive Title I funding based upon poverty, this also provides a more equitable distribution of resources through our operating budget to our schools.
Yeah, and so again, I bring this up as another example of an opportunity to address more cause versus symptoms, right? So not, and I'm definitely, we've had great success with restorative practices and things of that nature, but I'm just looking to see if there's a way to kind of look at this more as a mixture of solutions for schools rather than picking 3 of these and giving them, you see what I'm saying? So if I have, based on the poverty, then is there a way to combine that? Students who are hungry, or as we talked about a couple of board members' meetings before, suffering the embarrassment of not being able to pay for their lunch, they're going to act out. I mean, it's going to lead to some behavioral issues and some other concerns. So again, I think for me, the poverty rate and the district-wide no lunch piece is important because I think it gets at the heart of a lot of the reasons why our students are struggling emotionally and having some of the behavioral issues that they're having, combined with some of the more restorative practice and success coach pieces. But those would be the two.
Yep, you all are doing great. When I looked at these, I said these are so interconnected that it might
it's
be
just-
difficult to separate them out because one can build
Yep.
on the other based upon the root cause. And so, received.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Henson, is there any other way to capture the information for instance, lunch at no cost, other than the direct certification program? I mean, that's the only way we can capture that information?
When you say capture the information
As
regarding,
far as for student-based budgeting for the poverty rate and the lunches and everything, and because you said it impacted, our BEP formula, it impacts, our Title I funds. We can't figure out another way to get that information?
well, a number of years ago, the state went to the direct certification as the measure of economically disadvantaged, and so that's the only data that we have. They made that change, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. And when they did, they increased the unit cost for economically disadvantaged in the state's funding formula in the BEP to make it basically neutral. But it still is not capturing all of that data, and that data comes to us from the state, from 2 different sources within the state, and they don't always talk to each other or agree with each other as far as what the data should mean. And so that's the best data that we have, since it's basically has to come through the state and provided to us from them.
So I want to remind everybody that at the PAC meeting we were at this last week, parents really spoke to having more people in buildings. They talked about nurses, they talked about counselors, they talked about translators, they talked about social workers. I just want to remind us that really stood out to me, that just more adults that are caring for children in the building. So. Okay.
All right, we're ready for priority 3. All right, priority 3, as a reminder, is textbooks and instructional materials. I will just preview and let you know over the next few priorities. You don't have so many strategies under each. But here we have an investment in our ELA adoption, our prior year textbooks and supplements. And so essentially, because this is an ELA adoption year, the investment here is to provide a one-to-one material match for students and teachers. The prior year textbooks is to go back and adjust for what wasn't budgeted for with our science and social studies materials, and then a supplements are additional courses that need some shoring up as well.
If you all don't mind me pontificating for a brief moment, in recent conversations, I've heard at some of our budget meetings and then some community meetings I've been in, you hear community members who will say, well, why do you need to spend that much money on textbooks? Kids don't even use textbooks anymore. People don't read anymore. Everything should be digital. And this is just a reminder that when we purchase materials, it's not just textbooks. Like, it comes as a total package. So yes, it's the book, but it's also the link and the online materials. But even beyond that, I keep talking about this paradigm shift we have to have in the community around education. Just because you in your house don't use textbooks, that doesn't mean that the neighbor you have doesn't want or need textbooks. There are members of our community who may not be as fluent of a reader as you are, and some who are way more fluent but still love to have a book in their hand. And so I think when we talk about a free and quality education, we need to be mindful that we're meeting students and families where they are. There are parents who, we talk about this new math. It's not really new math, but it is definitely a new way of thinking. And so people want to be able to have an integrated math textbook, whereas none of us sitting at this table took integrated math. we didn't look at math in that way. So being able to have a textbook that your child can bring home to you, whether you think they're going to read it or not, I just really want us to stop putting that, well, not us, but I just really want the community to understand that that's a false narrative, that we're looking to make this investment in materials for our children, and whether one community member uses it or not, there are others who definitely will if they have access to it. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. That's all I needed to say.
Anybody else have comments on textbooks? I think we could all agree that we should have them. Get a book. Yes.
Making sure.
Okay. Okay.
All right, we'll move on to our next priority. Thank you. Pre-K, and again, this investment is to maintain the current pre-K seats that we have. It does not indicate an expansion at any schools or any classrooms or any additional seats. Our grant sunset back in December, so we want to protect that investment if at all possible. The only addition here is a pre-K analyst, which is needed to make sure that we have the right supports for our pre-Ks to make sure that they're of high quality and we can share best practices across the district and hopes that we can expand in future years.
Remind me how many pre-K seats and/or locations we have, please.
We have a total of 159 pre-K classrooms across the district. And this would, again, as Dr. Battle said, this would allow us to maintain all the seats in those classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
We still have waiting lists?
Yes.
Yeah.
Waiting lists. We do still have waiting lists in some areas.
So the 1.6 million is not considered part of the maintenance of effort?
It is. It is. It is. We have positioned it because we're currently offering these seats to our families in order to maintain that it is part of our maintenance of effort budget.
So I thought all of these other things were in addition to maintenance of effort. No, okay.
Those numbers are the same.
Okay. It is, okay.
Okay. All right, moving right along to our next priority, which is our schools of innovation. We've had lots of discussions around the need to budget within our operation budget to support our schools of innovation, which is heavily reliant on grants currently. So you have 4 different strategies here: expanding the community achieves model, expanding our operational supervisory support, expanding our school support model, and support around our Metro Schools Reimagined, which right now prioritizes 3 clusters where we have the highest concentration of our priority schools.
Any thoughts about any of these? Any
I don't know what it
questions?
means.
These are priority schools.
I get that.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't know what I'm getting. I mean, I know what it says, but I don't know, because we haven't had to, dare I say it, the MNPS next discussion yet. So I don't know what.
We did.
We did.
We did.
Oh, I
think
missed
you
it.
missed it.
Yes.
So it was what I watched on TV. That was it.
Yes.
Yes. The Teaching and Learning Committee that I saw. Okay, that's fine. I still don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out.
No, I mean, I was out of town. I can't be 2 places at one time. I'm okay with that. Yeah, that's fine.
All right. We'll move to our next priority. One strategy right now is around our translators. Of course, this is an investment of $820,000 to maintain and meet our federally required services to provide translators across our district to engage students and parents. So any discussion, that's one strategy, but happy to take
Necessary.
feedback. Okay. And our last priority is in our HR and IT infrastructure. The first 3 strategies are specific to human resources. The last one is around our IT field support. So I'll couple the first 3. We just know the importance of, if it's important for us to have a high-quality educator in front of every student, to make sure that our structures, our customer service, and our supports are there to build out the pipelines for retention and recruitment. And the last one around the IT field support really pushes out supports into schools. So it's less of an investment at central office and more of the supports to have access out in our school buildings.
Can we talk about the Grow Your Own? What does the $150,000 pay for?
It's literally the one I was looking at.
We're going to put Dr. Barnes on the spot. Welcome to the
And
family,
there's Lisa, too.
Welcome to the big show.
to the big tent.
And it is
Training wheels.
Case, it must be important.
So most of it is to help our support employees gain licensure so they can move from being paraprofessionals or support staff to being certificated staff. Most of that is to help with through the coursework and the praxis testing and helping guide them through those processes.
But we're not doing the licensure, somebody,
still rely
because
on
we
the
talked
DOE
about
for
that
that.
in the past.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay,
I was just paying for them to sit for.
got it. Thank you. Other questions on HR and IT?
All right. If not, I will end with this slide and kick it back over to our chair and vice chair of the committee. Just a reminder of what's happening next. We have 2 more community budget meetings happening tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. Hillwood on tomorrow and IT Crestwell on Thursday. Tentatively, the school board is set to vote on the budget on March 10th. March 31st, the mayor will present his budget to Metro Council. April 15th, this team will be before Metro Council to share a budget again, and council will vote on their budget by the end of May. And all of these dates are tentative, but it's closely matching the process as we are aware of to date.
Yes.
Of course. So for the translators that are at 220, is that part of the maintenance of effort, English learner support, that's the 1.2 million? Or is this, or would the translators be an add-on?
Separate, yep, that's in addition to, yes.
And then, what's my other question? And then for the pre-K, the 1.6 is part of the maintenance of effort budget, but the 111,000 would be a new addition, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So I just want to say that we have been in good communication with Mayor Cooper's office and feel like it's a very collaborative effort. And so definitely feeling like this is in pencil to some degree, and that there's not a guarantee that we'll vote on March 10th, which seems like right around the corner. We may push that back based on sort of these ongoing conversations with his office as they are also preparing their budget. We're trying to be respectful of the timeline he presented to us, but they're also willing to negotiate on that. And so appreciate their flexibility there, and also want to just say thank you for the capital budget that we got, so.
So with the compensation study not being in.
Right, that's part of the reason we probably need to
Yeah,
push this back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we have a sense for when we're going to get that information?
Still a couple weeks out? Yeah, we're still at least 3 to 4 weeks potentially away
So
from.
we'll definitely not be able to make
Yeah,
a
that
March
10th won't be,
10th
yeah.
number.
Correct.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Ignore that slide. No, I'm just kidding.
It's in pencil. It's in pencil. Yes.
I was going to be passive aggressive. I'll leave it alone.
Okay. So we have some folks that have signed up to do public participation. If they want to go ahead and line up. Are you in charge of this, Dr. Severe? Am I? Okay. Do I get a timer, or we're going to have people?
She wants to buzz somebody.
I don't want to buzz anybody.
She wants to buzz.
That's what I want him to do.
She wants that.
She doesn't want that responsibility. I
Want the
get
buzz.
that. I get that.
Cameo says she can keep
Cameo
it
can
from
do
here.
it.
I'll be here, Bill.
What's my movie, Tombstone? How big a Huckleberry? Ring my bell.
Really, yes.
Okay, y'all gonna be here 2 more hours. Come on, better get with it.
Okay.
Each person gets 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, he might be handling it from there. I can do it, David. Yeah, I'll do it.
Today.
You can do it.
a wealth of
We believe in
random
you.
knowledge, like random trivia. Like, how did you know that? You do. Never know what he's going to let you know. It's like, oh.
It's not the knowledge, it's the country sayings that get me.
Oh,
It's the
Lord willing and the creek don't rise. Like, wait, what?
No, he's got some doozies.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not sure about the clock anymore.
4 hours, 27 minutes.
It'll be shorter than that, I promise. Good evening. My name is Amanda Kale. I'm the president of the Metro Nashville Education Association and an MNPS teacher. And I just wanted to say a few comments on this presentation. First of all, that a group of our teachers met with a group of parents yesterday. We're trying to be more focused in expanding our focus as well. And I'm happy to report that the top things that were talked about here were also our top things. And so there is sort of a consensus, I think, amongst teachers, amongst families as well, particularly around employee compensation, the social and emotional supports, and the instructional materials. Those were our top priorities as well. So just to give you that feedback. Beyond that, there's a number of priorities that were listed in there that I think, as was said before, will improve recruitment and retention, particularly the support for our other support staff. As teachers, we rely heavily on our support staff and our bus drivers, and not having them impacts us as well. When our buses are late and our kids arrive late and they've been on the bus too long and they're all riled up, it impacts us as well in the classroom, and we definitely need our paras in there. So that $15 an hour minimum wage, more support, paid support days for our support staff and bus drivers, definitely. And the last thing that I wanted to say, kind of mirroring what was said here already about the social and emotional supports, one thing that I think teachers and also parents really strongly want is what was said, people. Making sure they're highly qualified people. Thank you.
Since I didn't know I was speaking till I got here, I'm sure I'll be under 2 minutes. So good evening, Dr. Battle, Chair, members of the board. My name's Michelle Sheriff. I'm a 27-year veteran of MNPS and current Vice President of Metro Nashville Education Association. As a former and current member of the Compensation Committee, there have been many compensation studies over the past few years and recommendations from Compensation Committee that have not been acted on. We're hopeful that this is the year that we have the political will to fund the multi-year compensation plan that's been proposed. With that said, we're also asking for dignity to be restored in the classroom. What would that look like? First, professional wages for all employees, including correcting the salary schedule for certificated employees. Second, we're asking for funding to provide the instructional materials so teachers can teach the state standards and students have equity in their materials across the district. Lastly, we need funding for advocacy centers and SEL supports in all schools, particularly elementary schools. I know it was mentioned middle schools and high schools, but with the changes that were made in recommendations in the past couple of years, there's little options for supports and behavior modifications and help in elementary schools. Not funding areas makes it difficult for students to have a certificated teacher in every class, and that affects teacher retention and recruitment. Ultimately, we're all here for the students, and budgetary decisions should be focused on what's best for our kids. And what's best is providing an excellent education for all of our students, and funding that for educators, materials, and SEL supports will help restore dignity for not only educators but our students. And as we've said earlier, and we've heard over and over, we need people and we need the materials to teach the students that we have. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Brad Race, and I'm president of SEIU Local 205. We represent the support employees. When I look at your budget, I feel like I'm at the Thanksgiving buffet, and I want that, I want that, I want that, I want it all. So you guys have some tough decisions ahead of you. But I want to let you know that our union is behind you 100% and hope you'll ask for what you need like you did last year, and we'll get it this year. One of the sobering slides in Dr. Battle's presentation that hit me really hard was how over the last 4 years the budget that you have gotten has fallen $121 million below what you've asked for. And, that shows up in support employees' pay. It shows up by the fact that the median pay for support employees is $22,000 for a full-time job. And we have over 1,000 support employees making less than $15 an hour. And this is in a city that's where reports say you have to have $80,000 to live a comfortable life. So we got some work to do. So obviously we support pay increases for support employees. The $15 minimum would have a tremendous impact on over 1,000 workers. And not forgetting the steps, too. We think steps help maintain equity in our pay system. Issues around paid days, additional holidays are really important, but not as important as pay across the board. I think things like a little more flexibility in use of paid professional development days on days where support employees are not working would be a great thing to consider. Another idea that we've raised is looking at, instead of everybody getting the same percentage, having a minimum dollar amount that everybody gets. Percentages are equal but not necessarily equitable. You can think about it pretty simply. Somebody making $25,000 is going to get $750 raise. Somebody who earns $50,000 is going to get $1,500. If you're making 25, $750 is really not moving you along the spectrum. If we had some minimum, whether it's $1,500 or $2,000, that's something to consider that would help move you towards that 15 if it can't happen all at once. Last thing, and I know I'm over time, is when you think about the custodian decision that you're looking at, I think it's important to remember that when the custodians were part of the MNPS family, they were part of the team, just like all support employees, all employees are. They were dedicated, a lot of them career employees. They cared about their job. They cared about the kids. One thing, as you look at that decision, too, is you should be not just a high-road employer, but a high-road consumer. And as you know, the custodians now under the current contract only make $10 to $12 an hour. So as you're making that decision, think about being a good consumer as well as a good employer. Thank you.
Is that everybody, Dr. Severe? Okay. So I think we are going to go ahead and wrap up the Budget and Finance Committee meeting now and have a little break before our meeting starts at 5. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.